by the trials, depravity in living. Darkness is where he is, until he found a light. The light of our life, the Word of God. Its radiance is the reason why he is now living in a pacific place, as promised by the Lord.
I was the type of person where I used to do drugs, I used to drink, I used to smoke, I used to party a lot. You know, the typical teenager in the US, where you're just wild and you're just carefree. When I was 19 years old, my mom suffered a stroke. And when she suffered a stroke, everything from then pretty much went downhill. We had to sell our house, we had to sell our car, pretty much everything that we owned, because we needed to pay for her hospital bills. And so when that happened, I had to pretty much be independent. And when she was assigned in the hospital, one of my cousins, his name is Edmund Figueroa, visited my mom. And it just so happens that my cousin Edmund was in the church, in the PMCC Fourth Watch. And when he visited my mom, he saw me there just being bored, basically doing nothing. So he invited me to go to the church around the area, which is in Fremont, locale. When he invited me, I was like, okay, sure, why not? Anyways, I'm not doing anything here. I'm just sitting here, you know, taking care of my mom. But when I went to our church in Fremont, everyone was so welcoming. You know, everyone was alive and very joyful, and very much had a warm welcome towards me. And you know, that was very different. Also, not only the environment was different, but also the message was very different. In the church, I could see that I was very much captivated by the very words of God and the message that was delivered. And you know, not only I was captivated, but the very detail and the very essence of the Word of God on how it was preached was very powerful. It was like a wake-up call to me, like, wow, you know, I never thought, you know, a message could hit me that much. And so eventually I started going to the church little by little. I saw the youth, how active they were in the church, because the youth was actually my age. And for me, I thought it was, you know, I thought it was normal for people my age to go out there and drink, you know, party and smoke and basically, you know, just have fun. But what I saw from the youth in the church was very different, you know. They're my age, but their lifestyle is completely different from my lifestyle. And I saw to them that how passionate they were in serving the Lord. And so when I saw the youth, how they served the Lord, I was very much challenged, because first of all, you know, I feel like that's something I need in my life. And so I thank the Lord, because in the church, not only I was captivated by the words of God, but also little by little, God was molding me. God was changing me inwardly, because that's when I saw how much I needed God in my life. Knowing that my mom is sick, all I can depend on at that time was no one else but God. And so on April 21st, 2009, that's when I decided to get baptized. And when I got baptized, I felt so happy, because I never knew that my life could turn around that drastically. because I always thought that that would be my life, partying and all that wild stuff, and just go to school and continue my college from there. But I thank the Lord, because ever since I got converted in the church, that's when I became more passionate in serving God. Because knowing that I have no more guide, that my mom is sick and my dad is actually not living with us, it's basically just me. So the only guidance I will get from is either from the world or from the church. The church is there with me, and the church is there to guide me all throughout. That's when I decided to dedicate my life in the missionary volunteer program. At the time, it was a one-year course. I was only about a year in the faith. And the reason I dedicated my life in that program is because I saw the need. And also at the time, I dedicated my life because I wanted to know God more, and I wanted to be much more involved. And so during camp of 2010, that's when I decided to dedicate my life in the MVP. And when I was in the ministry, of course, I was new in the faith. Although it was hard, although it was a sacrifice, although there was many struggles, being away from my home and not being in my comfort zone, I was very much happy in doing the things in the ministry. I became more involved in the media ministry. And in the job specs in South Bay Church. Being under Bishop Jonathan Friel in South Bay, I was very much empowered by the way he taught us, by the way he molded us into becoming a better Christian, and not only that, but in being a better servant. Because Bishop Jonathan wasn't only ministering us the words of God, but he was also teaching us life skills. He was also teaching us how to preach and how to communicate with people, and how to of course do evangelism and all that stuff.
Retrograding from the ministry is like losing your happiness, the assurance of infinite joy. As a missionary and called by the higher being is a life, a destiny.
After I ended my missionary volunteer program, I went back to my local church. And when I went back to my local church, it was very different. Because imagine being in the ministry, every day you're doing God's work. And then when you go back to your church, you really only go to church on like midweek services and then Sunday. And so all the other days, you're pretty much on your own. You're not necessarily have to do, the ministry life. And so when I was away, I felt as if something was taken out of me. I felt as if I'm disconnected with God. And my work wasn't just any other work. My work was pretty much scientific biological work, meaning we're always experimenting things. The work I'm doing is a work that can pay a family's life, that can pretty much support a family's life. And at my age, I was getting paid that much. And so, even though I was getting paid that much, I still wasn't satisfied. And the only time I remember I was happy and I was joyful was when I was in the ministry. And that's when I only thought to my heart that, my joy is not here in this world, but my joy is in the ministry. And so what I did was, first of all, I prayed for it, and I I thought about it, but there was one more thing before I make the final decision, and that is my mom. And like I said, my mom at the time was, she suffered in stroke. And so she's disabled for good. And being disabled, she needs someone to take care of herself. She needs someone to guide her, and she needed someone to always be with her every time she needs something. And that person is me. When I talked to her about it, she understood. And of course, being in a church, she sees the life of the members, that, there is no bad, or there is nothing wrong with what she sees in the church. And so, in her heart and in her mind, she knows that I will be okay. She knows that I will be safe, especially being in God's hands. And so on 2010 during camp, that's when I dedicated my life in the Bible school. Being in the ministry, there's a lot of things you have to sacrifice, especially, it's not your comfort zone. And also, the number one thing I could say is the persecution from the unbelievers. Because, when we are out there, doing evangelism, there are many people disrespecting you. There are many people trying to persecute you. And to me, that hurts the most. But, of course, you find strength from the Lord. What I saw from the ministers here in the Fourth Watch are very much passionate, very much in love in doing the work of God. I can see that every day, even though, every day they are doing the same thing, they never get tired of doing it. And that's where I saw their love for the Lord. That's where I saw their passion for the Lord. And that's where I am so much inspired and so much challenged on how they do their ministry. The part that our beloved apostle, Arsenio Tanforio, played in my life was his lifestyle. As we all know, at his age right now, he's still doing the work of God. And he's still continuing to serve the Lord. And he's not doing anything less on what he was doing before. If anything, he's doing more. He's doing much more. He's sacrificing more, and he's doing more in doing the work of God. That through his ministry, through his lifestyle, I was very much challenged, and I was very much inspired and in awe on how he is doing his ministry.
From a life without direction to a life dedicated to preach the gospel is what he has now. The fulfillment of bringing back the lost soul to God is now his source of happiness.
For me, true happiness is changing a person's life. Being in the ministry, our job is to preach the words of God. Our job is to preach the gospel. And our job is to evangelize. And for me, I could say that I am very joyful knowing that I have shared the gospel to those who are lost or to those who are broken. Because when I share the gospel to them, I could see in their heart their comfort, and I can see in their heart their joyfulness. And especially knowing that you have converted someone, it feels so good that you are a part of a person's life that have been changed. And to me, that is true happiness, is when you are the bridge between God and the person's life who's broken. I am very much dedicated in the ministry because I know that this is the best life. And although it's hard, although there's many struggles, being in the ministry is a joy that I can never find anywhere else, and a joy that nothing else can replace.